All right. So welcome everybody. Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone, first of all, for being here. My name is Kelly Gluckman. This is a weekly ongoing series featuring various subjects pertaining to living with HIV. It's brought to you by brightbod.com. These presentations are not intended to be used as medical advice. I am only speaking from my personal experiences. We're silencing all the microphones for about 20 to 25 minutes while I give my presentation. Afterwards, I'm going to open the floor up for questions. Please feel free to ask me any and all questions. I'm happy to answer. Without further ado, I'll get going. All right, so just to give you an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to introduce myself, who I am, why I'm here, how I got here. I'm going to talk about coping with an HIV diagnosis. We're going to talk about what HIV is, how it's transmitted, what happens when HIV gets into your body, when HIV becomes AIDS and what AIDS is. And then we're going to talk about medications, what they are and what they do. So this is me. This is something I did for Art and Understanding magazine. I'll read this to you just real quick. I've been HIV positive for a little over 6 years. I chose to go public with my journey. I've chosen to look at my journey with HIV as a blessing in disguise, and I'm able to do this in huge part because of Elizabeth Taylor's undying efforts in activism very early on in the epidemic. I look up to her as a role model. Her courage and compassion inspire me every single day. I feel honored to be able to keep her spirit alive through my work in this fight. So I represent the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. I am an HIV advocate, an activist, and I speak at colleges and high schools. I am a current student at UCLA. I don't know if you can tell, I'm in my dorm room right now. You can see the bunk beds behind me. So that's just who I am and where I'm at right now. This is a much better depiction of how I looked after I got my diagnosis. I think this is hilarious. This was my high school graduation photos. I was a very angsty teenager. But after diagnosis, I was really scared. I didn't know what HIV was. I didn't know what was going to happen. Before I was diagnosed, I say I knew 3 things for sure. I knew that HIV was a virus and that it causes AIDS. I knew that once you get AIDS, you die. And I knew that I was never going to have to go through that. So when I was first diagnosed, I went into immediate coping mode. So these are the things that I personally did just to cope with my situation. I chose to forgive myself. Now, forgiveness is a process. You're not just going to wake up one day and decide that you forgive yourself and the person who gave this to you or however you got this. It's a process. So that's kind of an ongoing theme, I guess, of my journey is choosing to forgive. Next, I got a book. This book particularly, What to Do in the First Year of an HIV Diagnosis. This book is a great, great guide. I highly recommend you go get that. This book, In the Absence of Angels, is another amazing book. Elizabeth Glazier, the author of this book, contracted HIV when she was giving birth to her first child back in the early 80s. And back then there wasn't medication. She accidentally passed it to both of her children because they didn't catch it until her daughter started getting sick. This book is extremely inspirational. It's kind of tragic, but it's also it'll make you feel grateful for where we are today in HIV and HIV treatment. AIDSmeds.com is a great place to get information. AIDSmeds.com also has forums where you can talk to other people living with HIV. Back when I was first diagnosed, I didn't know, I don't even think that anything like this, what I'm doing right now, existed. But if this existed when I was first diagnosed, this would have been a huge help for me too. So you're in a good place right now. And the last thing, probably the most important thing, in my opinion, is humor. Try not to be too salty. One of my favorite things that a friend ever did for me was to crack a joke about HIV. I like when people just treat me like a human, and when people just crack jokes with me. So laughter is a huge source of coping for me personally. Now we're going to talk about what HIV is. We're going to another coping mechanism of mine was research. I devoured as much research, and I got really nerdy, actually, about HIV. So what you're looking at right here is a CD4 T cell. Those are the T cells that HIV attaches itself to. And at the top there, you see, number one, the virus, and then you see it connecting itself to the CD4 T cell. Now, HIV is what's called a retrovirus, and that is kind of like, it pertains to how it replicates itself. So it attaches itself to your T cell, and then it inserts its RNA into your DNA, and then it makes your T cells into an HIV factory. So these T cells are your front lines. Those are like, their one job is to keep intruders out. I make the metaphor, the analogy that your CD4 T cells are like stormtroopers. Like, you have one job, like they have one job, right? So that's what HIV is and what it does to your T cells. When you don't have enough of those T cells, you become vulnerable to infection. So moving on, HIV transmission. HIV can only be transmitted through these 5 bodily fluids: breast milk, blood, semen, vaginal fluid, and rectal fluid. Another one is pre-cum, but that's only because there could be traces of semen in pre-cum. So those are the only fluids that can transmit HIV. HIV cannot be transmitted via sweat or saliva. It's a medical impossibility. So you can share straws, and you can kiss your friends or family. And so this chart talks about what HIV does once it enters your body. The blue line are your T cells, and the red line is the virus. So, man, I need like a pointer. I don't know how to do a pointer, so I'm going to try to be as descriptive as possible. So at the bottom left, you see the zeros. That's where HIV enters your bloodstream. So a normal person, a normal human, will have anywhere from 500 to 1,500 T cells. So that's where most people start, at the blue line up at the top. Man, I really need a pointer. That would be so helpful right now. So once HIV enters your body, I like to liken it to what it would be like if a bunch of kids showed up at Disneyland in the morning and just like bum rushed Disneyland, like that. So HIV just kind of like has a field day when it first enters your system, and the spike in the red is the virus. So the number of virus in your body goes up and your T cells drop. Normally, where you see acute HIV syndrome, at that point, people will have flu-like symptoms. Some people will have more severe symptoms than others. For me personally, I didn't really have any symptoms. I don't recall going through a flu or a cold or anything noteworthy at the time. I have a friend in New York, however, who landed in the hospital with pneumonia at her acute HIV stage. So it varies very widely. So there's really no way to tell if you've been infected unless you land in the hospital and they do an HIV test. At that point, they will be able to detect HIV in your system. However, your immune response jumps in, and your T cells and your body creates antibodies in order to fight the virus. So the number of virus goes down and your T cells jump back up. So at the clinical latency period, you will not test HIV positive. It takes about 6 months for HIV to show up in your system. Okay, I lied. I get at where the 2 lines are, that's when HIV will start to show up from there and over to the right. And then you'll go anywhere from 2 to 10 years without any symptoms. And at a certain point, your body can't fight off the HIV anymore. And then you go into AIDS territory. So what is AIDS? AIDS is when you have 200 T cells or less per microliter of blood. So here, the 1,200 T cells and then the viral load is measured in microliters. So AIDS is where you have 200 T cells or less, and at that point, you're vulnerable to opportunistic infections. And that's a lot of times that's when people end up getting diagnosed, which is kind of troubling. But unfortunately, that a lot of times that's the case. So let's talk about medications. So all of these medications are used to treat HIV. Now, you need a cocktail of medications. Some of these pills have more than one medication in it. Some pills have 2, some pills only have 1 medication. So there's different classifications of medications. And hold on. Okay, that's the one I wanted to go to. So if you look at this is very similar to the chart that I showed you before of what HIV is. So the big thing in the middle is your CD4 T cell, and those little X's are what the medications do. The medications, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm always losing words like a crazy person. Oh, my memory is awful. They interrupt, there we go. So medications interrupt the replication process. So those little red X's are the places where certain medications interrupt the replication process. The medication that I take personally actually isn't on here. I used to take Complera, which is in the little peach section in the bottom left, but they improved Complera and made it a little bit better. It's better for your bones, and it's just as effective as Complera. So they're constantly making medications better. Now, PrEP and PEP are very useful ways to prevent HIV. PrEP is something you take once a day to prevent exposure to HIV. So for myself and anybody who's living with HIV, your partner can take PrEP once a day to prevent exposure to HIV. So you can protect your partner using PrEP. There's a number of other reasons why someone might use PrEP also. But a lot of the time it's if you're at risk, whether you're dating someone, whether you're promiscuous or using drugs. But that's a way to prevent HIV transmission. And then PEP is post-exposure prophylaxis. And that is if you think you might have been exposed to HIV, you take that once a day for 30 days after a possible exposure. And then as you see down in the middle, Truvada is the name of that medication. It's the same medication for both PrEP and PEP. And Truvada itself is an HIV medication in and of itself. It is a nucleoside analog inhibitor. if you look, it's in the little green section in the middle. So I think I might have it on here. Fusion inhibitor, integrase inhibitor. Yeah, I'm not as nerdy about medication, but Truvada is used in a cocktail to treat HIV. I think that was a lot shorter than I expected it to be. It sure is. Anyways, so this is my social media. You can find me, I spend most of my time on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me on Snapchat. On Facebook, you're going to want to add the one with that as the profile picture. That is my public Facebook page. You can contact me and ask me questions if you want. My other one is private. I only add people who I know who I've met in person. So the best way to contact me via Facebook would be that one with that as my profile picture. So now I'm going to open up the floor to questions.
Kelly, how long have you been diagnosed with HIV?
I have been HIV positive for 6 years.
You said that you typically you get a cold or some kind of symptoms, but you didn't have anything. What did you have? How did you know you were diagnosed with it?
Okay, so I was dating my best guy friend at the time, and he and I had chosen to stop using condoms without having gotten tested first. So before him, I had always gotten tested regularly. I got tested like every 6 months. And so I took him in with me to go get tested just because I knew that we should have gotten tested before we stopped using condoms. So it was really like just a routine checkup to make sure everything was okay. There was nothing physical that prompted me to go in and get tested.
Kelly, I have a question.
Yes.
You said that HIV cannot be transmitted through saliva. Now, what if somebody would have like a abrasion or something on their lip or gum or something? Wouldn't there be a possibility of that being HIV being transmitted that way?
It's a very negligible possibility. I mean, I'm not a doctor. Again, this is not any kind of medical advice. But as far as I know, you would have to have an open cut that was bleeding. And the other person would have to have an open cut that was bleeding too.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the biggest misconceptions about HIV is that it's easy to transmit. Even when you're not on medication, it's not that easy to transmit. But of course, you want to take as many precautions and all that good stuff.
Were you afraid when you were first diagnosed?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Were you afraid when you were first diagnosed?
Yes, I was. I was very afraid. Like I said, all I knew is that after you get HIV, you get AIDS and then you die. And so it was very traumatic to get diagnosed. I dove into research and talking to others and getting support. So yeah, I'm in a good place. I've had 6.5 years to come to terms and to deal with it and to move forward. But I was very scared. Yes.
What was your parents' reaction when they first found out?
I told my brother and my dad over the phone a month after diagnosis, and my dad cried. My dad passed 2 years ago, but he was like the strongest and probably the only form of unconditional love I've ever had in my life. And he was really scared, and he felt really bad for what I was going through. My mom, I love my mom. she had a tough time with it. I waited a while to tell her. Our relationship is very difficult and tumultuous, but she's tried her best to be as loving as possible.
Yeti, how do you feel, and what make you being coming forward and being an advocate about HIV and AIDS? And also, it's a two-part question. Also, how do you feel about it? Is it something that you have embraced, whereby that you think that you can help others?
Oh yeah. So another one of my coping mechanisms when I first got diagnosed was to talk to other people, talk to my friends, people who weren't HIV positive. I don't keep things in. So I started telling people almost immediately, and people would go and get tested after talking to me. Because, you know, they were scared that people knew me. I was in a committed monogamous relationship. I wasn't who they thought would have HIV or would have gotten HIV. You know, people have this idea of what a person with HIV looks or acts like. And so people would hear what I was going through and they'd freak out and they'd go and get tested. And for that reason, I was like, wow, this is really important. I need to be doing this on a bigger scale. I get treatment in Hollywood, California. And so it's kind of the hub for the entertainment industry. And so my clinic called me and they were like, hey, you know, the CDC is looking for people who are willing to share their story about living with HIV. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so I did an ad campaign with the CDC, and then doors have just opened up left and right. And I just say yes to everything that comes my way. Like this is my first time doing a webinar. The Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation emailed me with information about the gentleman who runs this website. And I was like, yep, absolutely. So I try to tell my story as much as possible. I feel like if I had heard my story before I lived it, maybe I wouldn't have had to deal with this. And I also want to help others who are living with this to, I want to help inspire them to move forward, because HIV is really difficult. I want to help as many people avoid it or feel better that have it as possible.
Okay. How is your best guy friend? How is he doing?
Oh goodness. He and I broke up about a year after diagnosis. But I spoke with him a couple years ago. He's having a tough time. He's having a really tough time. He chose to stop taking medication. And I offered to help get him back into medication, but he didn't make the call. I don't know how he's doing at this moment. Unfortunately, I don't expect it to be very good.
Okay. And the same cocktail that you use, is it possibly the same one that the young lady Hildia and probably Magic Johnson, would that probably be the same type of cocktail that you?
I would imagine it would be a very similar type of cocktail. Any medication or any cocktail of medications is going to be very effective. Medications these days have gotten really, really good. I actually wanted to do my next webinar on medication specifically, talking about the history of it and how far it's come. But you know, if you get yourself to a doctor and you get yourself under medical supervision, you can become undetectable. which is what I am, which is what Magic Johnson is as well.
Okay. Any negative side effects from the medication?
No, not really. I have like some digestive issues, but other than that, no.
Okay.
No, it's the medications they're powerful, and the side effects are probably more long term. So unfortunately, in about 30 years, that's when I'll probably start seeing the effects of the medications I'm taking now.
Okay.
Did your friends first shy away from you when you were diagnosed or when you told them?
Actually, no. I'm really lucky that I live in Los Angeles. There's a lot more education here. And my friends, I think maybe only 2 times I've had someone like get kind of nervous about being close to me, but those were in dating situations. It's usually in dating situations that people get nervous. My friends have been pretty amazing.
So, of all the prescriptions, like, is there one that you would maybe favor more with regard to like side effects? Like, maybe there's more minimal, or it's more effective, or anything like that?
Well, here, you know what? I wonder if I can. Yeah, you can see me, right? Am I in like a little box on your screen, or am I big?
No,
Little.
it's like, yeah, it's a small box.
Little.
I can see your screen, yeah, and then you.
Okay. So this is my medication. It's called Odefsey. It's one pill. Oh, this one I haven't opened this one yet. But it's that most medications are not going to have side effects, really. I know a tripla tends to have like crazy Technicolor dreams. That's a 1 pill regimen. My ex was on a tripla, and he'd wake up and be like, I was on a roller coaster all night, like almost like an acid trip.
Mm-hmm.
He said.
Yeah.
But
if you exit the screen share, you can make it bigger.
I thought so. I'm so technologically challenged. Escape. Okay. New share. No. Pause share. No.
X out of that.
X out of what?
The PowerPoint.
Oh. Okay.
There you go.
Ah. Oh, okay. I'm so stupid when it comes to technology. I'm the worst millennial ever. Did I answer your question though?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
I have a question. It's going to be 2 questions. First question is, someone comes in and finds out or suspects they're on HIV and wants to, maybe already knows they have HIV, but wants to get started on the medication. What should he or she do first?
Wait, so someone comes in and or someone is diagnosed with HIV and they want to know what they do first? Is that
I guess you could say that. Yep.
Okay. See, every state is different. Every diagnosis is different. Every clinic is different. For me personally, that's my roommate. What's that? It's okay. So for me, I was diagnosed with HIV at Planned Parenthood. And they gave me pieces of paper with information about clinics in my area, and they said, good luck. And that I've learned is not the best way to diagnose someone with HIV. Other people are connected with care almost like immediately. So that the best case scenario, you're diagnosed at a place where they can connect you with care and they can walk you through those steps. If not, I say this all the time, Google is your best friend. Google, go to Google, type in, I was just diagnosed with HIV, what do I do? And then your state, and it should come up with clinics in your area. call a doctor. They'll retest you and then get you in to see a doctor.
Thank you. My other question is, if someone's already on medication and maybe they don't have health insurance and they're not completely comfortable or let's say comfortable with their medication, and they may want to switch. How should someone know whether or not they should switch? And in particular, if there's a huge financial barrier that's separating him or her from a new medication, how can he or she get that other medication, even though maybe he or she may already have a medication that's best for him or her?
Well, okay. I do not advise anybody to switch medications if they don't have to. Your doctor is going to prescribe the medication that is going to be best for you. So when you go in and get tested for the first time, they'll take like 10 vials of blood. They can see exactly which strain of HIV you have and which medication is going to work best for that strain of HIV. You're always talk to your doctor before switching or before, I mean, you have to get a prescription for switching medications. But if you're having severe side effects, there are some people who have side effects. So if you are experiencing severe side effects, tell your doctor. Your relationship with your doctor is one of the most important things for your journey in HIV. You want a doctor that you can trust, that you can talk to, that you can be open with. But yeah, I 100% talk to your doctor. As far as money is concerned, there are federal programs that subsidize HIV medication and treatment. There is the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, and there is the Ryan White Fund. So both of those programs are basically government subsidies for people living with HIV. Once you get on medication and once you get undetectable, you are no longer contagious. So it's in everybody's best interest for everybody who has HIV to get on medication so that we stop the spread of HIV. It's less expensive to prevent HIV than it is to treat someone with HIV for a lifetime. So ADAP and Ryan White work on a sliding scale depending on your income. So it should be relatively affordable depending on where you're at financially. For me, I'm a student. Everything is free for me. And it has been up until now because I'm broke.
And what about the PrEP and the PEP? What happens? Let me rephrase. Are there side effects for PEP or PrEP?
I know someone on PrEP, and he does not have side effects. It is much less powerful than HIV medication. Even though it is an HIV medication, it's only one part of a cocktail. So a cocktail is going to be 3 parts. And PrEP is only one part, so it's not as, again, I lost a word, powerful, potent. It's not as, yeah, you know what I'm saying. So you shouldn't have side effects from PEP or PrEP.
Okay, so then you're saying then you use PrEP, PET, and probably Truvada or the Odesi.
I'm sorry?
You'll use like PrEP, PET, Truvada, or Odesi to complete the 3-part series?
No. Okay, so this is my medication, Odefsey. This one pill has 3 medications inside.
Okay.
Right. PEP and PrEP are both Truvada. That is one medication they use it for both PEP and PrEP. So if you think you might have been exposed to HIV, you would go on PEP, which is 1 month's worth of Truvada. If you live a lifestyle where you're at risk, or if you're dating someone who's living with HIV, then you would go on PrEP, which is a once daily, every month dose. There you go. Always losing words. Anyways, I'm like 29 going on 59. Are there any more questions? I'll take like 1 or 2 more.
Basically, how do you feel overall?
Physically, I feel great. I feel very healthy. I go to the doctor every 3 to 6 months. They take my blood. They do a full blood panel and a physical, and I'm healthier than I've ever been. Emotionally and psychologically, I still have bad days just like anybody. But for the most part, I'm happy and I'm thriving. You know, I'm a student at a great university, and I'm very grateful for my medication and being able to be healthy, because if this were like 1990, it would have been a death sentence. So I try to keep that in mind and just be as grateful as possible.
Okay.
Is there one more question? If not, that's cool.
No questions.
Nice, no more questions. All right, I'll close it out by thanking everyone again. I hope I see you again next week. Like I said, I'm going to be going over medication a little bit more in detail. And yeah, thanks everybody. I appreciate your time.